Hey there, my sleepy friends. Tonight we're stepping into the quiet corridors of Manhattan's Upper West Side, into a building that's witnessed more secrets than most. We're heading to the Dakota, that grand old fortress of stone and shadows, where the wealthy hide behind thick walls and thicker curtains. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy these late night journeys into history's forgotten corners. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on that soft background hum of a fan or white noise machine, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Tonight, you're not a celebrity, not a photographer lurking outside, not even a doorman who gets to wear a uniform with brass buttons. You're something quieter, more invisible, the night janitor who knows every creak in the floorboards, every stain on the marble, every shadow that doesn't belong. Your story doesn't begin with fame or tragedy. It begins with a mop bucket and the peculiar loneliness that comes with cleaning up after people who will never know your name. In 1980, the Dakota building stands like a medieval castle dropped onto the corner of 72nd Street and Central Park West, all turrets and Gothic windows staring out over the park. It's home to actors, musicians, old money families, and quiet eccentrics who pay astronomical rent for the privilege of living behind these walls. And you're the one who makes sure their world stays clean, polished, and pristine while they sleep. You work the graveyard shift, moving through hallways like a ghost, invisible to the residents, but essential to their comfort. Your story isn't about the music, or the fame, or even the violence that's coming. It's about the weight of witness, the burden of being present when history decides to write itself in blood on marble floors. It's about carrying secrets that no one asks you to keep, but that settle into your bones anyway, growing heavier with each passing year. Tonight, we'll walk those halls together, smell the lemon polish on wood, hear the echo of your footsteps on stone, and understand what it means to be the person who cleans up after tragedy strikes. This is your story, quiet, observant, and haunted by the memory of a December night when everything changed, including you. You didn't choose the Dakota building, it chose you, the way most jobs do when you're desperate and qualified just enough to push a mop without breaking anything expensive. It's 1978 when you first walk through those massive iron doors, past the doorman who looks you up and down like you might pocket a chandelier. The building manager, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of mustache that suggests he takes himself very seriously, shows you around with brisk efficiency. Night shift, he explains, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the lobby. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You'll be working alone most nights. The residents value their privacy and their quiet. He emphasizes this last word like it's a commandment. You don't speak to residents unless spoken to. You don't ask for autographs. You don't tell anyone who lives here. Understood? You nod because you need the job and because you've never been one for small talk anyway. The building is overwhelming at first. 9 stories of carved stone and leaded glass, with hallways that branch off like arteries from a massive heart. Each floor has its own personality. The lower floors house families with children who leave behind juice boxes and scattered toys. The middle floors are filled with serious adults who drink expensive wine and read thick books. The upper floors are where the real money lives, in apartments so large you could fit your entire childhood home in their living rooms. Your duties are simple but thorough. Vacuum the carpeted hallways, mop the marble floors, empty the trash chutes, clean the brass fixtures until they gleam, dust the antique furniture in the common areas, and make sure the building sparkles like the jewel box it pretends to be. You learn the rhythm quickly. Start at the top and work your way down. Finish the lobby last so the morning doorman arrives to perfection. The residents are largely invisible to you at first, just names on mailboxes and sounds behind doors. Mrs. Henderson on the third floor always leaves her shoes outside her door in perfect pairs. Mr. Kowalski on the fifth floor leaves empty scotch bottles in his trash with the kind of regularity that suggests either celebration or sorrow. The family on the seventh floor, the Morettis, have twin daughters who sometimes peek around corners when you're working, giggling before disappearing back into their apartment. You carry a ring of keys that feels heavy with responsibility, not just to the utility closets and maintenance rooms, but to the building's secrets. Late at night, you hear things, muffled arguments through thick walls, the soft crying of someone who thinks they're alone, the kind of parties that don't make it into society pages. You learn to move quietly, to avert your eyes when doors open unexpectedly, to forget what you see the moment you see it. The building itself becomes familiar in a way that only comes from touching every surface. You know which floorboards creak, which windows stick, which radiators clank in the winter. You know the smell of each hallway. The second floor always carries a hint of pipe tobacco. The fourth floor smells like expensive perfume and lilies. The eighth floor has the sterile cleanliness of people who don't cook at home. Your supervisor checks in once a week, usually finding you polishing brass in the lobby around midnight. He's satisfied as long as the building gleams and no residents complain. You're good at your job, meticulous without being slow, thorough without being intrusive. You take pride in the work, not because it's glamorous, but because it's yours. In a building full of people who own things, you own this responsibility. By the end of your first year, you've become part of the Dakota's machinery, essential but invisible, like the heating system or the water pressure. You know which residents tip at Christmas and which ones look through you like you're made of air. You know the building's moods, how it settles at night, how it sighs in the wind, how it holds on to sounds and secrets in its stone walls. And then, in late 1979, a new resident moves into the seventh floor. John Lennon, formerly of the Beatles, and his wife, Yoko Ono. The building buzzes with subdued excitement, but your routine doesn't change. He's just another name on a mailbox, another door to be careful around, another person whose privacy you're paid to protect. You don't know it yet, but this quiet man with the wire-rimmed glasses and the careful way of walking through the lobby will change everything about your job, your life, and the weight you'll carry for the rest of your days. Part 2: Entry into Strange Events. By the winter of 1980, John Lennon has become part of the Dakota's rhythm, just another resident with habits you've learned to navigate around. He keeps odd hours, often coming home from recording sessions or interviews, sometimes not until you're halfway through your shift. You've seen him in the lobby a handful of times, always polite, always quiet, sometimes carrying a guitar case or a stack of papers that might be song lyrics or might be grocery lists. He nods when he sees you, which is more acknowledgement than most residents offer. Once, when you were polishing the brass mailboxes, he stopped and said, "Working hard tonight?" in that familiar Liverpool accent, softened by years in New York. You mumbled something about keeping busy, and he smiled, not the practiced smile of someone performing, but the tired, genuine smile of someone else working the night shift in his own way. December 8th, 1980, starts like any other Monday. You arrive at the Dakota at 10 p.m. sharp, collecting your supplies from the utility room in the basement. The building feels normal, the usual sounds of televisions through walls, the occasional footstep in the hallway above, the steady hum of the heating system working against the early winter cold. You start on the 9th floor as always, working your way through the hallways with the methodical patience that 2 years of this job has trained into your bones. The 9th floor is always quiet. The residents here are older, more settled, the kind of people who go to bed early and wake up to newspapers and coffee. You vacuum the burgundy carpet, dust the mahogany tables that hold fresh flowers, replaced weekly by a service that costs more than your monthly salary. The building feels settled tonight, peaceful in the way that expensive places always do when they're working exactly as they should. By 11:30, you're on the 7th floor, John and Yoko's floor. Their hallway is wider than most, with higher ceilings and more elaborate molding. You can hear music playing softly behind one of the doors, not their door, but one of their neighbors. It sounds like classical, something with strings that makes the hallway feel like a stage set for a movie about rich people having conversations about art. You're polishing the brass door numbers when you hear footsteps in the stairwell. Nothing unusual about that. Residents come and go at all hours, especially the creative types who keep schedules that would horrify anyone who works a regular job. But something about these footsteps feels different. They're hesitant, pausing on each landing as if the person is checking the floor numbers or maybe just catching their breath. The footsteps stop at the 7th floor, and you hear the stairwell door open and close. A moment later, a young man emerges into the hallway. He's disheveled in the way that suggests he's been walking for a while, maybe sitting outside in the cold. His hair is messy, and he's wearing a heavy coat that's seen better days. He looks at you for a moment, really looks, like he's trying to figure out if you belong here or if you're as out of place as he feels. "Excuse me," he says, and his voice has an odd quality to it, like he's practicing words he's planned to say. "Do you know if Mr. Lennon is home?" You're not supposed to give out information about residents, but the question itself isn't unusual. People ask about residents sometimes, delivery drivers, distant relatives, fans who somehow made it past the doorman. Usually, You direct them back to the lobby. Let the doorman handle it. You'd have to check with the front desk, you tell him, not looking up from the brass you're polishing. They handle all that. He nods, but he doesn't leave. Instead, he walks down the hallway toward the Lennon's apartment, moving with the kind of nervous energy that makes you glance up from your work. He stops in front of their door, stands there for a moment like he's listening, then walks back toward the stairwell. But instead of leaving, he sits down on the top step, just out of view of the hallway, but close enough that you can hear him breathing. You finish the 7th floor and move down to the 6th, but something about the encounter sticks with you. Not because it was threatening, the man seemed more nervous than dangerous, but because it felt wrong somehow, out of rhythm with the building's usual patterns. The Dakota attracts its share of unusual visitors, people drawn by fame or curiosity, or whatever it is that makes regular people want to get close to extraordinary ones. But this felt different. By the time you reach the 3rd floor, you've almost forgotten about the young man. The building has returned to its normal sounds, its familiar rhythms. You're thinking about whether to grab coffee from the all-night deli on the corner when you finish, whether to watch television when you get home, whether your landlord will remember to fix the heater that's been acting up for weeks. You don't know that upstairs, the young man is still sitting in the stairwell. You don't know that he has a gun in his coat pocket and a head full of voices that sound like radio static. You don't know that in a few hours, your quiet job will become the center of a storm that will follow you for the rest of your life. For now, you're just polishing brass and thinking about coffee, moving through hallways that feel safe and predictable and utterly normal. Part 3, Proximity to Crime. You're in the basement utility room restocking your cart with fresh cleaning supplies when you hear it, a sound that doesn't belong in the Dakota's carefully orchestrated quiet. It's sharp and echoing, bouncing off the marble walls and vaulted ceilings in a way that makes it hard to tell exactly what it was or where it came from. Not a car backfiring, you know that sound from the street. Not a door slamming, too sharp, too final. Your hands pause on the bottle of floor cleaner as your brain tries to categorize what you just heard. Then comes the screaming. It's muffled by distance and stone walls, but it's definitely human and definitely distressed. You abandon your cart and head for the service elevator, your heart beginning that slow climb into your throat that comes with knowing something is very wrong. The elevator seems to take forever, groaning its way up from the basement while the screaming continues. Not one voice now, but several, echoing through the building's corridors like an alarm system made of human terror. The elevator opens onto the lobby, and the scene that greets you will replay in your mind for the rest of your life. John Lennon is lying on the marble floor near the front desk, blood spreading in a dark pool beneath him. His wife Yoko is kneeling beside him, her voice carrying that particular kind of scream that comes when the world suddenly stops making sense. The doorman, Jose, is on the phone, his usually perfect uniform disheveled, his voice shaking as he tries to give the address to what you assume is 911. There's a young man sitting on the marble bench near the elevator bank, reading a book. while John Lennon bleeds out 10 feet away. It's the same man from the 7th floor earlier, but now he seems calm, almost serene, like this is exactly where he planned to be. The contrast is so jarring that for a moment you wonder if you're dreaming. Don't touch anything, Jose calls to you, though you weren't planning to. Police are coming, ambulance is coming. His accent is thicker than usual, stress stripping away the careful English he uses with residents. You stand in the doorway of the service area, still holding the bottle of floor cleaner, watching as the Dakota's perfect calm disintegrates into chaos. Yoko's screams have dissolved into a kind of keening wail that seems to come from somewhere deeper than her throat. John is still moving, his eyes open, trying to speak, but only managing sounds that might be words, or might just be the sound of air leaving his body. The young man with the book looks up at you for a moment, and his eyes are completely empty. Not cruel, not angry, just vacant in a way that makes your skin crawl. He's waiting for something, but you can't tell what. He seems disconnected from the violence he's apparently caused, like he's watching it happen to someone else. The front doors burst open and paramedics rush in, their equipment clattering on the marble as they kneel beside John. They're professionals, efficient, and calm in the way that comes from seeing the worst things humans can do to each other. They work quickly, checking vitals, applying pressure to wounds, radioing information in medical shorthand that you don't understand, but that sounds urgent and desperate. Police arrive moments later, first 2 uniformed officers, then detectives in long coats that make them look like characters from a movie about crimes in expensive neighborhoods. The lobby fills with people who don't belong. Paramedics, police, photographers, men in suits who speak in whispers and take notes about everything. One of the detectives approaches you. "You work here?" he asks, and when you nod, he pulls out a notebook. "What's your name? What did you see?" You tell him about the young man in the hallway earlier, about the sound you heard from the basement, about finding the scene when you came upstairs. He writes it all down with the kind of careful attention that makes you realize you're not just a witness anymore, you're part of the investigation. They take John away on a stretcher, Yoko following beside him, her hand gripping his like she can hold him to life through sheer force of will. The young man, whose name you'll later learn is Mark David Chapman, is led away in handcuffs, still eerily calm, still looking like he's somewhere else entirely. After they're gone, the lobby feels enormous and empty. There's blood on the marble floor, dark and spreading, soaking into the grout between the stones. Jose stands near the front desk, his hands shaking as he lights a cigarette, even though smoking isn't allowed in the building. 40 years I've been working buildings like this, he says to no one in particular. Never seen anything like that. Never. You realize you're still holding the bottle of floor cleaner. In a few hours, it will be your job to clean up the blood, to make the lobby look perfect again, to erase the physical evidence of what happened here. But you know that no amount of cleaning will ever make this feel normal again. The Dakota will never sound the same, never feel safe in the same way. Every footstep in the stairwell will carry the memory of Mark Chapman's hesitant climb. Every sound from the street will echo with the possibility of violence. You're still standing there, surrounded by police tape and the lingering smell of gunpowder, when one of the detectives tells you that John Lennon has died at Roosevelt Hospital. The man whose quiet nod was the closest thing to recognition you got from any resident is gone, and you were close enough to hear it happen. Part 4. Emotional Tension. The blood doesn't come out easily. Even with industrial strength cleaner and the kind of scrub brush that usually handles anything, the marble holds onto the stain like it's trying to preserve evidence. You work on it for 2 hours after the police finally clear the scene, on your hands and knees in the empty lobby, scrubbing at the place where John Lennon died while the building settles into an uneasy quiet around you. It's almost sunrise by the time you get the floor clean, and by then the news trucks have started arriving. Through the Dakota's thick glass doors, you can see reporters setting up cameras, photographers with long lenses pointed at the building's windows, crowds of people holding flowers and candles and homemade signs. The world has already learned what happened here, and now they want to get as close to it as possible. Jose comes back to work early, even though his shift doesn't start until 8. He looks like he hasn't slept, and probably hasn't. Building manager wants to see you, he tells you, his voice hoarse from the night before. Says to come in this afternoon, before your shift. You nod and gather your supplies, moving through the now familiar routine of ending your shift. But everything feels different. The hallways that were comforting in their predictability now feel watchful, like the building itself is holding its breath. The elevator seems too quiet. Your footsteps echo differently on the marble. When you leave through the service entrance, you can hear the crowd gathered out front. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, singing Imagine and Give Peace a Chance in voices that carry through the December morning air. Someone has turned the sidewalk outside the Dakota into a memorial with flowers and pictures and messages written on pieces of paper that flutter in the wind. You walk home through Central Park, taking the long way to avoid the crowds, but even here, you can't escape it. People are crying on park benches, strangers comforting each other, teenagers with boomboxes playing Beatles songs that echo off the bare trees. The whole city feels like it's mourning, and you're carrying a secret that feels too heavy for your shoulders. You were there, you heard it happen, you cleaned up the blood. At home in your studio apartment, you try to sleep but can't. Every time you close your eyes, you see that young man sitting on the marble bench, reading his book like nothing had happened. You hear Yoko screaming, the sound of Jose's voice shaking as he gave the address to the dispatcher. You smell the metallic scent of blood mixed with the lemon polish you use on the Dakota's floors. The phone rings around noon. It's a reporter from the Daily News who somehow got your number. I understand you were working at the Dakota last night, she says, her voice friendly but hungry. I'd love to talk to you about what you saw. You hang up without saying anything, but the phone keeps ringing. By evening, you've stopped answering it entirely. When you show up for your meeting with the building manager that afternoon, there are still crowds outside, smaller than the morning, but more persistent. Someone has brought a guitar and is playing Beatles songs while people sing along. The sound follows you through the front doors and seems to linger in the lobby. The building manager, Mr. Reeves, looks like he's aged 10 years overnight. His office, which you've only been in once before when you were hired, smells like coffee and stress sweat. Hell of a thing, he says, not quite meeting your eyes. Hell of a thing. Police say you were very helpful. You nod because you're not sure what else to do. We're going to need to be extra careful about security for a while, he continues. More people asking questions, more people trying to get inside. Reporters, fans, curiosity seekers. You're not to talk to any of them. Anyone asks you anything about last night, you refer them to me. Understood? You understand. What you don't understand is how you're supposed to go back to work in a building where someone died while you were cleaning the floors 3 stories above. How you're supposed to walk past the spot where John Lennon bled to death and just keep polishing brass like nothing happened. There's going to be a lot of attention on this place for a while, Mr. Reeves says. The residents value their privacy now more than ever. We need to make sure they feel safe, that their home still feels like home. But as you walk through the building that night, starting your shift just like always, you know that the Dakota will never feel like home to anyone again. It's become something else, a crime scene, a tourist attraction, a place where tragedy lives in the marble and echoes in the hallways. The residents you see look shell-shocked. Mrs. Henderson on the 3rd floor leaves her shoes outside her door as always, but now they're positioned differently, like she's ready to run. The Moretti twins don't peek around corners anymore. Even the building's sounds have changed. Fewer dinner parties, less laughter, more televisions turned up too loud, as if people are trying to drown out their own thoughts. You're not just the night janitor anymore. You're a witness, a keeper of secrets, a person who knows what the last moments of a Beatles song sounded like when played in blood on marble floors. Part 5. Inner Conflict. Sleep becomes your enemy. When you finally manage to drift off in the mornings after work, your dreams are full of footsteps and stairwells, young men with empty eyes, and the sound of marble being scrubbed clean. You wake up at odd hours with your heart racing, checking and rechecking the locks on your apartment door, listening for sounds that don't belong. The phone calls don't stop. Reporters, documentary filmmakers, true crime podcasters, they all want to talk to the janitor who was there. Someone has leaked your name, probably from the police report, and now you're part of the story whether you want to be or not. You get an unlisted number, but somehow they find that too. You start leaving your apartment through the service entrance, taking different routes to work, looking over your shoulder in ways that make you feel paranoid and justified at the same time. At the Dakota, security has tripled. There are guards at every entrance now, metal detectors in the lobby, cameras where there used to be privacy. The building feels like a fortress under siege, which isn't far from the truth. The crowds outside have settled into a permanent vigil, smaller during the week, but swelling on weekends when tourists come to gawk at the place where John Lennon died. You find yourself studying every new face in the building, delivery drivers, repair technicians, anyone you don't recognize. The young man with the book haunts your peripheral vision. Sometimes you think you see him in the lobby, sitting on that same marble bench, and your heart stops until you realize it's just a resident reading a newspaper or a security guard checking his schedule. The other building staff treat you differently now, not unkindly, but with a careful distance that makes you realize you've become something they're not sure how to categorize. Jose nods when he sees you, but the easy camaraderie you'd built over 2 years feels strained. The day shift maintenance crew asks if you're holding up okay in voices that suggest they're not sure they want to hear the real answer. The residents are worse. Most of them avoid eye contact entirely now, hurrying past with their heads down like they're afraid of what they might see in your face. But a few stare, and you can see the questions in their eyes. What did you see? How much blood was there? Did he say anything before he died? They want the details, but don't want to be the ones asking for them. Mrs. Henderson stops leaving her shoes outside her door. The Moretti family moves out entirely. You hear from Jose that they couldn't stand living on the same floor where it had happened, even though it didn't happen on their floor at all. It happened in the lobby, but the whole building feels contaminated now, infected with the possibility of violence. You start carrying a small notebook, writing down anything unusual, unfamiliar faces, strange sounds, maintenance issues that need attention. It's supposed to be about doing your job better, but really it's about feeling like you have some control over the chaos. If you document everything, maybe you can prevent the next disaster. If you pay attention to every detail, maybe you'll see the warning signs that you missed before. But the warning signs were always there, weren't they? The young man in the hallway, nervous and out of place. The way he asked about John Lennon specifically. The fact that he came back. You replay that brief conversation 1,000 times, wondering if there was something you should have said, something you should have done. Should you have called security? Should you have stayed on the 7th floor longer? Should you have trusted your instincts when something felt wrong? The building manager calls you into his office again 3 weeks after the shooting. "How are you holding up?" he asks, and for the first time since you've known him, he seems genuinely concerned rather than just professionally polite. "I'm fine," you lie, because saying anything else feels like admitting weakness. "The residents have been asking about you," he says. "Some of them are concerned. They think maybe the stress of what happened might be affecting your work. Your work is perfect. If anything, you're more thorough now, more careful, more attentive to every detail. But you know what they really mean. You make them uncomfortable. You remind them that their safe, expensive world isn't actually safe at all. You're evidence that violence can happen anywhere, even here, even to someone as famous and beloved as John Lennon." "I'm doing my job," you tell him. "I know you are," he says, "and we appreciate it. But if you ever need to talk to someone, if this gets to be too much," he slides a business card across his desk, a therapist's name and number. You take the card, but you know you'll never call. How do you explain to a therapist that you can't stop thinking about blood on marble? That you jump every time you hear footsteps in a stairwell? That you've become afraid of your own building, the place where you've spent the last 2 years learning every corner and shadow? How do you explain that you're not just traumatized, you're guilty? Guilty for not stopping it, guilty for surviving it, guilty for being close enough to witness history and too far away to change it. Part 6, Turning Point. The moment comes 6 weeks after the shooting, on a cold January night when the crowds outside have finally thinned to just a few die-hard fans, leaving flowers that freeze before morning. You're working the 5th floor, polishing the brass handrails that run along the hallway walls, when you hear footsteps in the stairwell again. Your whole body goes rigid. The sound is wrong, hesitant, pausing on each landing just like that night in December. You set down your polish and cloth and move quietly toward the stairwell door, your heart hammering against your ribs. Through the small window in the door, you can see a young man climbing the stairs. He's wearing a heavy coat, his hair disheveled, and he keeps checking the floor numbers like he's not sure where he's going. For a moment, your mind goes completely white with panic. It's him. Mark Chapman has somehow gotten out, gotten back into the building, come back to finish whatever he started, but then the man turns his face toward the light, and you see that he's younger, different, not the same person at all. Just another lost soul drawn to the building where tragedy lives. The rational part of your brain tells you to call security, to let the guards handle it. That's what they're paid for. That's what the new protocols are designed for. But something else takes over. The part of you that's been carrying guilt for 6 weeks. The part that wonders what might have happened if you'd acted differently that first night. You open the stairwell door. "Can I help you?" you ask, trying to keep your voice steady and professional. The young man looks up, startled. He's maybe 25, with the kind of pale, desperate face that suggests he's been walking through the city for hours. "I'm looking for John Lennon," he says, and his voice has that same practiced quality that Chapman's had, like he's rehearsed this conversation. "He's not here," you tell him, which is true in the most final way possible. "But this is where he lives," the man insists. "I read it in the paper. Apartment 72, 7th floor. You should call security. You should escort him to the lobby and let the guards remove him from the building. You should follow protocol and protect the residents and keep yourself out of trouble. Instead, you find yourself talking. He died," you say. "In December, someone shot him." The man's face goes through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, grief. "That's not... I came here to give him this." He reaches into his coat pocket, and for a terrifying moment, you think he's going for a gun. Instead, he pulls out a cassette tape, homemade, with John written on the label in careful block letters. "I wrote some songs," he says. "I wanted him to hear them. I thought maybe..." His voice trails off as the reality hits him. The man he came to see is dead, has been dead for weeks, and no one told him because no one knew he existed. You stand there in the stairwell, looking at this lost, broken person who traveled however far to share his music with someone who will never hear it, and you make a choice that will haunt you for the rest of your life. "You need to leave," you tell him. "Security will be here soon, and they won't be as understanding as I am." He nods, clutching the cassette tape like it's the most precious thing in the world. Could you tell them I was here, that I had something for him?" "Tell who?" you ask. "Anyone," he says. someone who knew him, someone who cared. You take the cassette tape. You don't know why. It's not your job. It's not your responsibility. And it certainly isn't going to help anyone. But something about his desperate hope breaks your heart in a way that's too familiar. The man leaves, disappearing down the stairwell and out of the building, and you're left holding a cassette tape full of songs that will never be heard by the person they were meant for. You slip it into your pocket and go back to polishing brass, but your hands are shaking. Later, when your shift is over, you walk past the memorial outside the building and drop the cassette tape among the flowers and letters and photographs. Someone else can decide what to do with one more stranger's dreams. But the damage is done. You've crossed a line, gotten involved in a way that goes against every rule and every instinct that's kept you safe in this job. You've let your guilt override your judgment, and now you're carrying not just the memory of John Lennon's death, but the weight of every broken person who comes looking for something that can never be found. You don't report the incident to security. You don't mention it to the building manager. You just carry it, like you carry everything else, quietly, alone, and with the growing understanding that some burdens only get heavier with time. Part 7. Obsession. You start keeping a journal, not of daily events or personal thoughts, but of patterns. Who comes and goes from the building, when they arrive, how long they stay. You note which residents have changed their routines since the shooting, which ones seem more nervous, which ones have hired private security. You document every delivery, every repair technician, every visitor who seems out of place. The journal starts as a precaution, a way to feel useful and alert, but it quickly becomes something else, an obsession. You carry a small notebook in your back pocket and fill it with observations that probably mean nothing but might mean everything. Mrs. Chen on the 4th floor now has her groceries delivered instead of going out herself. The Hoffmans on the 8th floor installed additional locks on their door. A man in a blue jacket walked past the building 3 times on Tuesday night, but never went inside. You study maps of the building, learning every entrance and exit, every stairwell and service corridor. You time your rounds to the minute, noting any deviations from your normal schedule. If someone wanted to get into the building, when would they try? Where would they hide? How long would they have before security noticed? The security cameras become your obsession. The building manager gave you access to the monitoring station as part of your enhanced duties, and you spend your breaks reviewing footage from the night of the shooting, looking for clues that the police might have missed. You watch Mark Chapman's arrival over and over, studying his movements, his body language, the way he seemed to know exactly where he was going. But the more you watch, the more questions arise. How long had he been planning this? Had he been to the building before? Did he know about the service entrances, the blind spots in the camera coverage, the times when the lobby would be least crowded? The police classified it as the act of a deranged fan, but the precision of it haunts you. Someone that mentally unstable shouldn't have been able to plan something so efficiently. You start researching Chapman himself, reading every newspaper article, every interview with people who knew him. You learn about his troubled childhood, his obsession with fame, his previous attempts to meet celebrities. But the more you read, the more convinced you become that there were warning signs that should have been spotted, patterns that should have been recognized. You begin to see potential threats everywhere. The teenager who lingers outside the building after school, staring up at the windows. The delivery driver who asks too many questions about which apartment gets which packages. The tourist who takes pictures of the lobby through the glass doors. Any of them could be the next Mark Chapman, and you're the only one paying attention. Your rounds become investigations. You memorize the faces of everyone who enters the building, cross-referencing them with your notes about previous visits. You develop a mental catalog of suspicious behavior, people who seem too interested in the security procedures, who ask about specific residents, who return multiple times without an apparent reason. The building manager notices your increased vigilance during one of your weekly check-ins. "You're doing good work," he says, but there's something in his voice that suggests concern rather than praise. The residents feel safer knowing you're paying such close attention. But you know some of the residents don't feel safer at all. You've overheard conversations in the elevators, fragments of whispered concerns about the janitor who's always watching, and ever since that night, he's been different. They appreciate your diligence in theory, but in practice, your constant attention makes them uncomfortable. You've become a reminder of their vulnerability, a walking embodiment of the fear they're trying to forget. You install a police scanner in your apartment, listening to the chatter from precincts across Manhattan. Every report of a suspicious person, every domestic disturbance, every mention of the Upper West Side sends your pulse racing. You cross-reference addresses with your mental map of the neighborhood, calculating distances and response times. If something happens near the Dakota, you want to know about it immediately. Sleep becomes even more elusive. When you do manage to rest, you dream about missed clues and failed interventions. You see yourself spotting Chapman earlier, calling security, preventing the whole tragedy. In these dreams, you're a hero instead of a witness, someone who saves the day instead of someone who cleans up the aftermath. But in the waking world, your hypervigilance feels increasingly futile. For every potential threat you identify, 10 more slip past unnoticed. The city is full of unstable people, obsessed fans, angry loners who might decide that violence is the solution to their problems. You can't watch them all, can't prevent every possible tragedy, can't carry the weight of everyone's safety on your shoulders. The irony isn't lost on you. In trying to prevent another shooting, you've become the kind of paranoid, obsessive person who might commit one. You catch yourself staring at residents with the same intensity that Chapman must have stared at John Lennon, studying their routines, learning their vulnerabilities, imagining scenarios that start with good intentions and end with blood on marble floors. Part 8, Moral Reckoning. 3 years pass, 3 years of 60 minutes specials and Rolling Stone retrospectives of documentaries that use your building as a backdrop for tragedy, of tour buses stopping outside so passengers can take pictures of the place where John Lennon died. The Dakota has become a shrine, a tourist destination, a landmark defined not by its Gothic architecture or prestigious residents, but by 6 seconds of violence in its lobby. You've been interviewed by police, FBI, private investigators hired by various media outlets, but you've never spoken publicly about what you witnessed. Every time a reporter approaches you, and they still do, though less frequently now, you give them the same answer: I don't have anything to say. It's become your mantra, your protection against becoming part of the story that everyone wants to tell and retell and analyze until it loses all meaning. But silence has its own weight, and you feel it pressing down on you with each passing year. You know things that biographers don't, details that documentarians would pay handsomely for, moments that could fill in the gaps in the official narrative. You know that Chapman seemed calm, almost relieved after the shooting. You know that John was still conscious when the paramedics arrived, that his eyes were open and aware. You know that Yoko's first words weren't screaming, but a whispered, no, 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 repeated like a prayer or an incantation. These details feel sacred somehow, too intimate for public consumption. They belong to the people who lived them, not to the millions who want to consume them as entertainment. But keeping them secret feels like a betrayal too, of John's memory, of the truth of your own role as a witness to history. The moral complexity of your position becomes clear during a conversation with your sister, one of the few people who knows exactly what you saw that night. She's visiting from Ohio, and you're walking through Central Park on a Sunday afternoon when you pass Strawberry Fields, the memorial garden that the city created in John's honor. Do you ever think about writing a book? She asks, watching tourists pose for pictures next to the Imagine mosaic. I mean, you were there. You could tell people what really happened. What really happened is that a man got shot, you tell her. That's it. Everything else is just details. But the details matter, she insists. They make it real, make it human. Otherwise, it's just another celebrity death story. You watch a young couple taking selfies beside the memorial, smiling as if they're at a regular tourist attraction rather than a monument to violence. Maybe it should just be another celebrity death story, you say. Maybe some things don't need to be more real than they already are. But that night, lying in your apartment, listening to sirens in the distance, you wonder if your silence is really about protecting John's dignity or protecting yourself. Are you keeping quiet out of respect for the dead, or because speaking would mean admitting how helpless you felt, how utterly unable you were to prevent what happened? You think about the young man with the cassette tape, the one you helped escape the building instead of turning over to security. In the 3 years since, you've wondered if he was just a harmless fan, or if he could have been dangerous too. Your choice to let him go was based on instinct, on a moment of compassion that could have been catastrophic if you'd misjudged the situation. That's the weight of witness. Not just seeing the truth, but deciding what to do with it. Every choice feels fraught with consequence, every action or inaction rippling outward in ways you can't predict or control. You saved one desperate person from humiliation or arrest, but what if your mercy had enabled something worse? The building itself seems to judge your choices. Late at night, when you're polishing the same marble floors where John Lennon bled, you feel the weight of all the secrets these walls contain. The Dakota has witnessed decades of human drama, births and deaths, affairs and betrayals, fortunes made and lost, but most of it remains hidden, protected by the silence of those who keep the building running. You've become the keeper of one particular secret, the guardian of a truth that belongs as much to history as it does to you. But guardianship requires wisdom you're not sure you possess, judgment calls that feel too important for someone who just wanted to keep the floors clean and the brass polished. In the end, your silence becomes its own kind of testimony. By refusing to turn your witness into a commodity, you preserve something that feels more valuable than any book advance or documentary fee: the dignity of private grief, the sanctity of unspoken truth, the radical act of keeping something sacred in a world that wants to consume everything. Part 9: Passage of Time. By 1990, 10 years have passed since that December night, and the Dakota has settled into a new rhythm. The constant media attention has faded to occasional anniversary pieces. The crowds of mourners have been replaced by tour groups who stop for photos before moving on to their next destination. The building has learned to carry its tragedy like an old scar, visible if you know where to look, but no longer the defining feature of its existence. You're still there, still working the night shift, though your hair has more gray now, and your knees ache from a decade of kneeling on marble floors. New residents have moved in, people who weren't there that night, who know the story but didn't live it. To them, you're just the night janitor, efficient and invisible, part of the building's infrastructure. The residents who were there have mostly moved on. Some left immediately after the shooting, unable to reconcile their need for safety with their desire to live in a place marked by violence. Others stayed but changed, installing additional security, altering their routines, carrying the weight of witness in their own ways. Mrs. Henderson finally moved to Florida, leaving behind 30 years of memories and a collection of shoes that never quite felt safe outside her door again. But new stories have layered over the old ones. The third floor now houses a young family with twin boys who race their toy cars down the hallways. The seventh floor, once defined by tragedy, is home to a classical musician who fills the corridor with the sound of piano practice. Life has returned to the Dakota, not erasing what happened, but incorporating it into the building's larger narrative. You've watched 3 building managers come and go, each bringing their own approach to security and resident relations. The current one, Ms. Rodriguez, is the first to ask you directly about that night. Not for details or documentation, but to check on your well-being. 20 years you've been here, she says during your annual review, most of it since the incident. That's got to be hard, being reminded every day. It's my job, you tell her, the same answer you've given for a decade. Jobs can be changed, she points out. If you ever want to transfer, day shift, different building, we could work something out. But where would you go? This building, these hallways, this routine, they're not just your job anymore, they're your identity. You've become part of the Dakota's story, woven into its history as surely as the stone and mortar. Leaving would feel like abandoning your post, like walking away from a responsibility you never asked for, but can't quite abandon. The obsessive vigilance of your early years has mellowed into something more sustainable. You still notice everything, still document unusual occurrences, but you've learned to distinguish between genuine threats and the ordinary strangeness that comes with city living. The teenager who used to linger outside the building turned out to be waiting for his girlfriend who worked at the coffee shop across the street. The delivery driver who asked too many questions was just new to the job and trying to be thorough. Most suspicious behavior has innocent explanations, and time has taught you the difference. Your journal has evolved too. Instead of frantically documenting potential threats, you now record the building's gentler mysteries. Which residents have found love? Which ones have lost it? Whose children have grown up and moved away? You note the changing seasons reflected in the lobby's flower arrangements, the way different holidays bring different energy to the building, the small human dramas that play out in elevator conversations and hallway encounters. Sometimes you catch yourself thinking about John Lennon not as the man who died in your lobby, but as the resident who nodded politely when he saw you, who asked if you were working hard, who seemed tired but not unkind during those brief encounters. You wonder what kind of neighbor he would have been if he'd lived, whether he would have stayed in the Dakota or moved somewhere quieter, whether his son would have grown up racing toy cars down these same hallways. The memorial outside the building has become permanent, maintained by the city and visited by thousands of tourists each year. You sometimes watch from the lobby windows as people sit beside the Imagine mosaic, reading or meditating or just resting in the presence of something larger than themselves. It's become a place of pilgrimage for people seeking peace, hope, or connection to something meaningful. But inside the building, life moves forward with the steady rhythm of ordinary days. Residents come and go, seasons change, years accumulate like layers of polish on brass fixtures. The Dakota endures, carrying its history with the quiet dignity of a building that has seen everything and forgotten nothing, but refuses to be defined by any single moment, no matter how tragic or transformative. You endure too, walking the same routes, cleaning the same surfaces, keeping the same silent watch over a building that has become both your burden and your home. The weight of that December night will always be with you, but it's no longer the only story you carry. Now you're the keeper of 1,000 smaller stories, the witness to the daily miracle of people building lives in the shadow of history. Part 10, Quiet Legacy. It's December 8th, 2000, 20 years to the day since John Lennon died in the lobby of the Dakota building. You're 62 years old now, and your knees protest every time you bend to scrub a floor or polish a brass fixture. Your hands, once steady and strong, shake slightly when you hold your cleaning supplies. The building manager has hinted more than once that you've earned retirement, that you could step back with honor and a pension that would cover your simple needs. But tonight, you're making one last round through the building that has been your world for over 2 decades. Your replacement starts tomorrow, a younger man with eager eyes who reminds you of yourself when you first walked through these doors in 1978. You've trained him thoroughly, shown him every corner and crevice, every shortcut and secret that makes the Dakota run smoothly through the night. But you haven't told him about the weight he'll carry, about the way history can bleed into marble and stain more than just stone. The building is quiet tonight, the way it always is during the deep hours when most residents are asleep and the city outside settles into its gentler rhythms. You move through the hallways with the muscle memory of 22 years, your footsteps echoing softly on floors you've polished thousands of times. Each room holds its own collection of memories, not just from that terrible night, but from all the nights that came after. The seventh floor, where you first encountered Mark Chapman, now houses a young couple expecting their first child. The wife is a doctor, the husband a teacher, and they've filled their hallway with the warm scents of cooking and the gentle sounds of a life being built. They don't know that their floor was once the staging ground for tragedy. To them, it's just home. The lobby, where you scrubbed blood from marble until your knuckles bled, now gleams under soft lighting that makes the Gothic architecture look less like a fortress and more like a sanctuary. The memorial outside has drawn pilgrims from around the world, but inside, the building has reclaimed its identity as a place where people live rather than a monument to where someone died. You pause near the spot where John Lennon fell, though there's no marker to indicate the exact location. The marble shows no trace of what happened here. You made sure of that with your thorough scrubbing all those years ago. But you know exactly where he lay, can still see the outline of his body, still hear the echo of Yoko's grief bouncing off these walls. In your pocket, you carry something you've never shown anyone, a small piece of marble from that night, a chip that broke off when the paramedics dropped their equipment. You picked it up without thinking, a fragment of the moment that changed everything, and you've carried it ever since. It's become a talisman, a reminder, a weight that connects you to the history you witnessed. Over the years, you've been offered money for your story, more money than your pension will ever provide. Publishers, filmmakers, journalists, they all want to know what you saw, what you heard, what you felt. But you've kept your silence, not out of contractual obligation or fear of legal consequences, but because some things are too important to sell. Your legacy isn't in the story you never told, but in the work you did quietly, year after year, keeping this building safe and clean and dignified. You've been part of hundreds of smaller stories, residents who found love, children who grew up, families who built memories in apartments that became homes. You've been the steady presence that made their lives possible, the invisible guardian who ensured that their private dramas could unfold without interference. The residents you've watched over don't know your name, won't remember your face, will never understand the weight you've carried for them. But their ignorance is your success. You've allowed them to live their lives without fear, to raise their children without paranoia, to love and lose and hope and dream in a building that could have been defined forever by 6 seconds of violence. As you complete your final round, turning off lights and checking locks, you realize that this is what witness means. Not just seeing history happen, but carrying its weight so others don't have to. You've been the buffer between tragedy and normalcy, the keeper of secrets that protect rather than exploit. the guardian of a peace that can never be perfect but can still be preserved. Tomorrow, someone else will walk these hallways, polish this brass, mop these floors. They'll learn the building's rhythms and routines, its quirks and challenges. But they'll never know what you know, carry what you carry, or understand the full weight of keeping watch over a place where ordinary people try to live extraordinary lives. You leave your keys on the building manager's desk and walk out through the lobby one last time. Outside, the memorial is quiet, except for a few flowers left by anonymous hands. The city sleeps around you, vast and indifferent, carrying millions of stories that will never be told, millions of witnesses who will never speak. But you've done your part. You've kept the watch, carried the weight, and protected the dignity of the dead and the living alike. In a world that wants to consume every tragedy, you've preserved something sacred through the radical act of silence. Your footsteps echo one last time on the Dakota's marble floors, and then you're gone, another invisible guardian fading into the city's endless night, carrying your secrets like prayers that will never be answered but never need to be spoken aloud. And so we leave you there, walking away from the Dakota building for the last time, carrying 22 years of witness in your bones and silence in your heart. Your story doesn't end with revelation or redemption, but with the quiet dignity of duty fulfilled and secrets kept sacred. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, remember that history is made not just by those who grab headlines, but by those who clean up afterward, who keep the world running while others make their mark upon it. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones never told. The most powerful testimonies are the ones never given. The greatest service is the kind that goes unnoticed and unrewarded. In a building where tragedy once bled into marble, life continues, messy and beautiful, and ordinary and profound. Children grow up, families find home, love takes root in the same soil where violence once flourished. And somewhere in the city, a former night janitor carries the weight of witness, the dignity of silence, and the knowledge that some things are too sacred for words. Sleep well, knowing that in a world full of noise, sometimes the most important voices are the ones that choose never to speak at all. The Dakota building stands tonight as it has for over a century, solid, enduring, keeping its secrets safe while sheltering the dreams of those who dwell within its walls. Sweet dreams, and remember, not all heroes carry fame, and not all guardians wear uniforms. Sometimes they carry mop buckets and cleaning supplies, moving through the night like invisible angels, keeping the world clean and safe and quietly beautiful, one marble floor at a time, floor at a time, floor at a time, floor